Hello and welcome to what am I welcoming you to again? Ah, no, this is not an outtakes and I don't edit. So I'm welcoming you to the Confident at Work podcast. If this is your first time with us, welcome. I promise that this is my version of professionalism. So, and if this is your first time with us, welcome. Really welcome. I mean that. And if you're a returning podcast listener, and I know there's loads of you out there, welcome to you too. So, in this week's episode, we're going to be talking about assertiveness. And I hear this a lot. I just need to be more assertive. So, today we're going to take a look at what assertiveness means, why it's important in a work context, and how you can develop some more assertiveness if that is what you want to do. So, I looked at the dictionary definition of assertiveness, and I thought the dictionary definitions were pretty crap, actually. So I'm just going to go with my own definition after doing some research, and my definition kind of cobbled together. And you can see whether you agree with this, because I think intrinsically we know what we mean when we say assertiveness, or that if somebody says to me, I want to be more assertive, I'd be really curious and ask them questions because they know what that means. And for me, it's being able to be open and honest, expressing my ideas clearly, making decisions, and dealing with any conflict or challenge rather than kind of burying it or sidestepping it. And I have a lot of examples of assertiveness or non assertiveness. And I just thought I would share a couple with you before we get started with the rest of the episode. So, here's an example of where you might need to be assertive. And it's challenging when you think that something isn't quite right. So, it's that moment, you're in a meeting, somebody says something, maybe everybody agrees, and you think, hang on a minute, that isn't right. This is my area of expertise, I know this, or I just really don't agree. In that moment, if you were being assertive, you'd probably be open and honest, express your idea clearly, and then if there was any conflict or challenge, you deal with that rather than burying it or sidestepping it. The second example of where you might need to be assertive is when you get asked that question in a job interview, why should we give you this job? I think that a good answer in that case requires you to be assertive. You've got to be open and honest. You've got to express your ideas clearly. So you've got to tell them, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I can do, this is what I can do for you, and this is how I'm going to do it. And sometimes people struggle with that question. They don't really feel the kind of internal confidence they need in order to be really assertive when they're asked that question and really give them a good answer. You know, it feels like tooting our own horn or blowing our own trumpet, but really that's a moment where we have to do that. Another example is one of mine, and it's very recent. I am doing a training session for a particular provider. And they asked me if they could pay me less than I'd quoted. Now, what do you think I said? I didn't, looking back on it, deal with it particularly assertively. Had I been assertive, I would have said, that's my standard rate. The reason that I've quoted it is this, and can we have a discussion about it? I didn't do that. But next time, now I've thought about it, I think I probably will. So there's loads of examples, and you'll have loads when it pays, literally in my case, to be assertive. And I thought because we're looking at assertiveness, it'd be useful to look at what the other ends of the spectrum are. So if you imagine assertiveness as like the middle of a stick, for instance, and what are at the opposite ends of that stick? So one end, I think, is aggressive. The other end is passive. And somewhere in the middle, I think, is assertive. So If we take a quick look at one end of that spectrum, aggressive. So being aggressive might sound like getting my own way no matter what, interrupting people or being loud, being violent, forcing people to do things that they don't want to do or they can't do, getting my point across but at other people's expense, winning at all costs. And that might not be direct necessarily. That could also be indirect, right? It might be passive aggressive. I used to stare at the clock sometimes when I thought people were going on too long. That was aggressive, but it was passive aggressive, not active aggressive. So let's say that was one end of the stick, me staring at the clock when I thought somebody was waffling on for too long in meetings. I'm not proud of this, by the way, but I want to give you examples. And then if I think about what passive behavior would be, and that would be at the other end of the stick, that might be keeping quiet for fear of upsetting someone, avoiding any conflict, maybe saying yes when actually I mean no or not now. It might be failing to express your feeling or thinking about something. It might be being indecisive or trying to justify your actions. It might be apologizing. It could be sounding really vague about your ideas and what you want so that nobody really knows. And it might also mean that you do all of this while inwardly feeling annoyed or frustrated. And let's say in that meeting when I thought somebody was waffling on for too long, my passive behavior might have been to do absolutely nothing. It might have been to kind of withdraw from the conversation, like mentally be absent, be doing something else with my mind or my time, or sending someone an email, kind of checking out. So that's aggressive and passive, which seem like two other ends of this stick. But assertive is somewhere in the middle. So let's say I was being assertive in that scenario and somebody really was waffling on for too long. I might say, I think that if I understand your point, it's this. And we need to get through X, Y, and Z on our agenda. So is it okay if we wrap that conversation up here? Or something similar. But it would have been to actually express, okay, I'm not sure we've got the time here, and I think we need to move on, rather than me being aggressive by staring at the clock or me being passive by ignoring it, checking out, and saying nothing. And here's another little example that I got from a women's development workbook by Willis and Daisley to show you passive aggressive and assertive. And in this example, this person was having trouble getting started on a piece of work, and they say to a colleague, this is the passive version, silly me, I'm getting nowhere with this, my brain must be going. The aggressive version, I don't know whose stupid idea it was to do this anyway. I've always said this company was run by idiots. And assertive, Tracy, I know you're busy right now, but I'm really stuck on this and I could do with some help. When could you spare me 10 minutes today? Right? You hear the difference. So that is passive, aggressive, and assertive. And for some people, especially people who might not have been as assertive as they've wanted to be historically, being assertive might feel a bit aggressive because it might be more direct, it might mean expressing yourself clearly. And that can be tricky for people, especially when you're used to maybe being more passive. So, why might somebody struggle to be assertive? And if you're struggling to be as assertive as you would like, why might you be struggling? Well, there's a few different things that I've thought of, and the main one, and because obviously I talk about confidence and I'm a confidence coach, it may be that you're just not feeling very confident overall. And it's easier to be assertive, to be direct, to express your opinion and your ideas, share them clearly, make decisions when you're feeling more confident. So it may be that overall you just don't feel particularly confident. I know that I struggle to be as assertive as I might be when I am just before my period. You might find that too. I find like day 26, day 27, I'm more likely to be passive or aggressive than I am assertive. There might be a specific situation where you feel really outside your comfort zone. So even if normally you feel that you're appropriately assertive and you're happy with that, there may be a certain situation where maybe you're meeting people for the first time, maybe you're in a new environment, maybe you're in an environment with seniors and you don't feel as comfortable or you're outside your comfort zone. And that might mean for a lot of people that they struggle to be assertive in that moment. And then another thing that can happen is that you have gone kind of into some sort of fight, flight, or freeze mode. So, whether there is a real or perceived threat in your environment, you may find yourself going into a fight, flight, or freeze. And from there, it's going to be very difficult for you to be assertive. From there, most people find that they will fight, which might be the aggressive end of the stick. They might flight or freeze, which might be the passive end of the stick, but it's probably more difficult to be assertive when you're in that state. And that's a physical state as well as it impacting your mental state. So, why is it important for you to be assertive at work? And you might say, well, for me, it's because I need to be able to do X, Y, and Z. But I had a thought about some of the reasons that it's a good idea to be able to be assertive at work when you want to be, because I think it helps you to be properly understood by the people around you, especially if you're able to be clear and direct and express your ideas. People are going to get where you're coming from and why. And then other people know where they are with you. So let's say I'm being really passive. Other people might not actually have a clue that inside I'm completely seething about this thing you've asked me to do. I might think you're fine with it, but actually you're really, 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 really mad. But because you were acting so passive and just agreed to do the thing, I don't really know what's going on with you and I don't know where you are. It may also mean that you give someone an unrealistic expectation if you're being particularly passive. So let's say I'm like, can you do this piece of work for me by Tuesday? And you're like, yeah, I suppose so. But inside you're thinking, not a cat and hell's chance, mate. I'm not going to be able to give that to you for the next month. You might be setting up a false expectation. So I think, oh yeah, she's fine with it. Tuesday, great. But actually, there's no way you're going to be able to give it me on Tuesday. I think being assertive gives you a better chance of getting what it is you want. Doesn't mean that it guarantees you getting you what you want. And I think that's a kind of caveat with assertiveness, which is in some situations you can be as assertive as you like. It does not mean that somebody is going to agree with your point of view or go with what you want. If I think of an example from my old work, I was doing a particularly big piece of work, and then I was asked also to do another particularly big piece of work on top of it. And the timescales were aligned for these two things. And I was very assertive about what I thought about that and whether or not I thought it was appropriate. I didn't. I didn't think I was the right person to do it. I didn't think it necessarily matched my skill set too well. And I also had this other like big strategic piece of work happening. So for all those reasons, I just did not think I was the right person to be doing it. I could say that as assertively as I wanted, but it was my boss's decision and he decided I was going to do it. Fine. He's the boss. Sometimes being assertive does not get you what you want. However, I still think it's useful because even if it doesn't resolve the situation in the way that you want, I think it leaves you feeling better that actually you stood up for what you thought and you directed it clearly and you communicated it and you actually said, I don't think this is a good idea and here's why. And also, that could be a bit of ass covering, right? And I think about this as a lawyer because we obviously used to do a lot of, was it ass covering? It was clearly recording risks, I would say, rather than ass covering. And that might be another thing where you really do need to be assertive. So let's say that a decision is being made in your organization and you can spot two potential risks to that decision being made. If you're acting kind of aggressively, you might be like, this is a stupid decision. What the hell? you're idiots. And if you're being really passive, you may just go along with the crowd and not really say anything. But if you're being assertive, you're more likely to say, look, I hear that we're going in this particular direction. I don't think I agree with you, but there's two particular risks that I've identified. Here they are. You're allowing somebody then to make that decision knowing what those particular risks are. You're kind of putting them on notice. That might be good for your business, but it may also be good for you. So you might have other reasons why you think it's important for you to be assertive at work. But I want us to take a bit of time to think about how to develop assertiveness. And when I'm looking at assertiveness with a client, there's different ways of looking at this. I would really want to know, what does assertive mean to you? So what would you actually be doing or saying differently if you were being assertive in this particular situation? And I don't want it to just be like a vague or woolly thing. I want someone to actually give me a real life example, maybe of an instance where they felt like they weren't assertive. So maybe you can think back on that now. If you'd like to be more assertive and you think, maybe I'm not always doing that right now, can you tell me about the last time when you weren't assertive? And when I ask people that question, they usually would be able to tell me, well, yeah, actually, there was this certain situation happening and this is what happened and then I did this. And you want to get really clear on that. So it's not just some sort of vague concept like, oh, I just have to be kind or I just have to be assertive. It's like, well, that's a bit vague, isn't it? What are you actually going to do with that? So choose a specific target situation where you think you're going to get the opportunity to practice being assertive, or a target situation where you need to practice being assertive. And you might choose a lower stakes situation, maybe, if you're not too used to being assertive or you think this is going to take a little bit of work. So practice that target situation. And I want you to actually think about what your assertive response would be. If you were going to deal with it assertively, what would your response be in that target situation? So let's say my target situation is my boss has asked me to do a particular piece of work by Friday. And this is a good target situation for me to choose because my boss is always giving me like random new bits of work and then giving me a deadline. So I might choose that situation and I want to choose then what my assertive response would be. So currently my response is, in this example, that I'm being quite passive. I'm just agreeing to the timescale that's been given and then struggling and working overtime in order to make that a reality. So then I choose what my assertive response is going to be. So next time my boss gives me an in-week new piece of work with a deadline, I am going to what? What are you going to do? So my choice is that I'm going to say, can I take a look at my other priorities for this week? Because I'm not sure that Friday is realistic. Or maybe if I already know what my priorities are, I could say, how does that fit in with X, Y, and Z that you've already asked me to do? I'd like to understand the priorities so that I can make sure that I do the right thing because I don't think that I can get to all of it. Or I might choose to say, that's not going to work with the current work that I'm doing, but how about I give it you back next Thursday? Right? Maybe one of those is my assertive response. So you would choose yours. For your target situation, what would your assertive response be? And then the next step is just to try it. It might feel awkward. It might feel uncomfortable. It might feel weird. It probably will because you're getting used to doing something new. And whenever you're doing something new, you're going to know about it, probably physically. So you might feel that kind of dread, you might feel that clenching, you might feel that fight or flight things start to kick in, or you might just feel super awkward and uncomfortable saying it. You might fumble over your words, you might sort of get a bit mixed up. Fine. This is trying it, this is practice. So practice and then give yourself a pat on the back for giving it a go, even if you completely got it wrong, you stumble over your words and nobody had a clue what you meant, because this is a work in progress. And you might want to actually, if you really want to work on this, you might try doing a bit of evaluation. So let's say you were my coaching client. I would have you practice a specific situation, choose your response, and then I would want you to practice it, right? So if you're going to come back to the next session, I'm going to say, how did it go? And you might say, well, I did manage to say X, but I didn't manage to get out Y. And we'd say, great, you managed to say X. That's progress. So where are you going to go from here? What will you try next? Will you keep trying? Keep trying, keep noticing progress, keep seeing what's going well. Even if you fluff it and you fail, don't worry. Don't give yourself a hard time. Don't beat yourself up. Don't be aggressive with yourself. And maybe don't be completely passive either. But if you're going to be assertive with yourself, you'll be like, okay, I tried. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. And here's what I'm going to do differently next time. The next thing that I would recommend if you want to be more assertive at work is consider doing some holistic confidence work. So the kind of work that I do with people is to look at what is currently happening, which is getting in the way of you feeling confident. And I have a set of habits and patterns which I organized into what I call a low confidence cycle. Now, if you're a regular listener to the podcast, you will be familiar with this and you'll know about it. But if you're not, a low confidence cycle basically is just a set of habits which you may be unconsciously adopting at work that are going to be making you feel less confident than you need to. And when you feel generally less confident than you need to or you want to, it's going to be harder for you to be assertive. Once you've done that holistic confidence work and you're now into what we call a high confidence cycle, it's going to be easier. You won't have to think much about being assertive because assertiveness will naturally flow when you're feeling more confident. And if you think about what confidence is, so trusting in yourself and your abilities, you're more likely, of course, to be assertive when you're trusting in yourself and your abilities. So try it. Maybe even let me know how it goes. And if you're thinking, yeah, I need to do some holistic confidence work and I would like to do that in 2024, I'm currently taking private coaching clients. I will leave a link in the show notes so that you can book a call with me. And on that call, what we'll do is look at your particular challenges. I'll get a really good understanding of your role, your responsibilities, your context. And then we'll look at the areas where you're struggling with confidence at the moment. And I'll explain to you exactly the work that we would need to do together in order for you to start feeling more confident. And it's not a guess, it's not magic, it's a repeatable process that I do over and over again with clients, and it works. So if you want to come and do some private coaching work with me, click the link in the show notes and book a time for us to talk. However, there is another way of doing this work with me, which is a lower cost but still totally cool option. And that is Confident at Work, the group program. And starting from, I can't remember exactly when this podcast is coming out, but basically starting from the beginning of February, we're going to be having group coaching calls inside the Confident at Work program. So as well as getting all the training you need to go from a low confidence cycle into a high confidence cycle, which is going to help you to feel and to be more assertive, you're also going to get the opportunity within that program to come, get coached by me, listen to other people being coached, and build your confidence that way. So I'm going to leave both of those details in the show notes, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.